Tonight we've come to Maidenhead for the last of our special election programmes before May the 7th. Millions of people will head to the polls next week for elections that could transform the political map of Great Britain. In England, 5 parties are battling for control of the councils, from Plymouth to Newcastle upon Tyne. Our audience members arriving here this evening reflect the general political picture across the nation. Tonight, of course, that's England. And tonight they want to ask first and foremost about the attack in London yesterday and what can be done to keep the Jewish community safe. On tonight's panel from the government, we have the Environment Secretary, Emma Reynolds. She worked as a special advisor during the Blair years and said earlier this week, we've all been talking about Peter Mandelson too much. For the Conservatives, Victoria Atkins is the Shadow Environment Secretary and a former Health Secretary in Rishi Sunak's cabinet. She says the past 2 weeks have exposed Keir Starmer's poor judgment and that he is now finished. Daisy Cooper is Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats. She's accused Labour of looking like continuity Conservatives, says the public are fed up with the soap opera. Zia Yusuf is Reform UK's Home Affairs spokesperson. He's welcomed a series of Tory defections to his party, but says no more will be allowed after May the 7th. And Rachel Millward is the co-Deputy Leader of the Green Party and Deputy Leader of Wealdon Council, where she serves as a Green councillor. She is also running to be the Mayor of Sussex and Brighton in 2028. Welcome to our panel, welcome to our audience here in Maidenhead. Great to see you, and of course, welcome to you at home. Joining the conversation on social media, if you so wish, or just sit back and see what everyone's got to say here. Right, let's kick off with our first question, which is from Mark Welsh.
Hello, yes. Following yesterday's yet more horrific attacks on Jewish people in London, what can be done to ensure more safety and security for this community across the country?
So I'm sure none of you need telling. Yesterday, 2 Jewish men were stabbed in Golders Green in North London, and that follows a series of attacks on the Jewish community in recent months. Victoria.
Well, first of all, obviously, all of our thoughts and prayers go to the Jewish community, our friends and neighbours. But I was speaking to the Jewish Leadership Council this morning, and they told me that thoughts and prayers are not enough. They want action. And I think this is a real question for us all. As Kemi has said, this is a national emergency and we now must lean into it. What does that mean? It means, for example, there are questions about the prevent definition. There is a genuine question for the Home Secretary whether the prevent definition is too narrow, whether it needs to be broadened to include this sort of attitude and approach. I would widen it further, though. I would say, well, we know that anti-Semitism is coursing through university campuses. What is the Education Secretary doing to stop that? I, as former Health Secretary, started the work in the NHS to ensure that Jewish patients could feel safe getting the care they need and deserve. And my question to the Health Secretary is, what is he doing to build on that? But there is a bigger question, I think, for us in politics as a whole. There's a legitimate question. And only today we have seen toing and froing from Zach Polanski, the leader of the Greens, and we have seen, sadly, 2 arrests of Green Council candidates for anti-Semitic comments. And so the question for us in politics is, what can we do to clear up the mess in the political arena, as well as ensure that has wider ramifications across society? And the one thing I think that the Prime Minister can do to show that he gets this as a first step is to say that he will ban those marches that have been dominating our cities over months and months and months now, pro-Palestine, but also we know breeding grounds of anti-Semitism. Those marches of hate must be stopped, and we as a society are standing with the Jewish community to say this is enough. We will not have this on our time and on our watch.
Well, Rachel, I'm going to come to you, obviously. First of all, these 2 Green Party candidates have been arrested on suspicion of stirring up racial hatred. They were detained by the Metropolitan Police this morning. What's your comment on that?
Well, first, I need to comment on the attack that happened yesterday. And it is horrifying. The rise in anti-Semitism in this country is real, it's undeniable, it's horrific, and it's abhorrent, and we are all, I'm sure, disgusted by it. And the Green Party stands absolutely united in wanting to create a society without hate, where we actually learn to live together with our differences, that we learn that from an early age, and that we really all stand together against any form of racial hatred and certainly against anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a problem in the UK right now. That appalls me.
So what about these two Green Party candidates, Rachel, saying things like resistance is freedom, with an image of an armed man wearing a Hamas headband, another saying ramming a synagogue isn't anti-Semitism, it's revenge. Those are Green Party candidates.
Those comments are abhorrent.
So why didn't you suspend them?
They are going through disciplinary process. The reality is that it would be utterly ridiculous for any political party here to suggest there is no anti-Semitism within their party, no racism within their party. We have 235,000 members, and of course, a handful of those people will not share our values in actual fact, and so we're doing everything we can do to address that.
But the reality is, everything you can do, Rachel, why haven't you booted them out?
Well, I think they are in disciplinary process. In fact, I think you're saying they're being arrested. It's now a police matter.
But
we are
of course,
but
before it was a police matter, you could have taken action yourselves.
I think so. What's happening is, as soon as we have any kind of indication that anyone's been even close to the line of anti-Semitism, those are being investigated, and there is a really swift action. Let's be real. We are the only party in the UK that has a Jewish leader. Zach Polanski is one of only 5 Jewish leaders we've ever had of a political party. He personally experiences anti-Semitism every single day. And I'm proud to stand with a Jewish leader and a Muslim deputy and to, do what we can for unity. And that's what we all need to be doing. We need to sort of stop playing political football with this and really say, how do we build societies? We need to invest in community cohesion. We need to invest in our education systems from the beginning so that people learn how to live together safely across difference. The Jewish community must feel safe here. It is absolutely abhorrent and heartbreaking what's happening.
I will bring the rest of the panel in, but since you mentioned Zach Polanski and community cohesion, you got the head of the Met today effectively accusing Zach Polanski of stoking the opposite of that through retweeting comments about the police being heavy-handed when it came to arresting the suspect. Mark Rowley has written to Zach Polanski, maybe you've got a response, I don't know, and basically saying that Zach, this kind of inaccurate and misinformed commentary that contributes to rising tensions that we see in society, and it undermines officer confidence to act. That is what the head of the Met is accusing Zach Polanski of doing. What's your response to that?
Well, look, I'm extremely grateful to the people in the emergency services who responded. I'm sure it was beyond terrifying, and these people are brave, well-trained, and they do, I'm sure, a brilliant job.
So when your leader retweeted a tweet that was criticising the police for being heavy-handed, do you echo that?
I haven't actually seen the retweet, so I'm not quite sure what he was looking at there. Of course, police response always needs to be proportionate. Of course it does. But the headline here is, what do we do about rising anti-Semitism and making sure that we don't have hate in our society? And that is all narratives of hate. We cannot have divisive language setting one community against another. We all need to be learning to live together peacefully.
Man at the very back with their glasses.
Thank you. So my wife's Jewish and travels regularly into London. She proudly wears the Star of David's, and I'm getting increasingly concerned with the escalation of incidents in London. Getting increasingly concerned for her. Now, I actually think the government committed a spectacular own goal in categorising Palestine Action as a terrorist group. I think it completely deflects from these marches where my wife and I have both been in attendance and seen lots of anti-Semitic comments. And I think.
And do you agree with the call by the Conservatives to ban those marches?
I think that they can be policed differently and should be policed differently. I mean, this has been going on for 18 months, 2 years now. There doesn't seem to be a real level of control from the government. I appreciate the police are in a difficult position, but there is a lot of comments and hate speech and anti-Semitism that does take place at these events that is, I think, the police just cop a deafen towards it. I would just like to add very quickly that Zach Polansky has made his comments on Israel very clear, but has, as far as I'm concerned, not made his points heard at all in terms of protection of British Jews. The two incidents are so separate, but people are very, very quick to conflate the two.
Woman here in the green jumper.
I would really like to have politicians modelling a lack of more inclusive practice. I think it starts at the top with our politicians who are democratically elected, who are responsible for the safety and the security of our society. And I'd like to see a cross-party response so that we get everybody's heads together to address what everybody is agreeing is an increasingly difficult issue for our society.
Okay, man a little bit further along with a white T-shirt and a grey shirt. Yes.
So I just want to echo a little bit of what the lady just said there, in the sense that, you know, these attacks that we've seen, they are horrific. They're only the peak of the mountain, if you like, in the sense that we have deeper social problems, right? I don't think we'll ever be able to eliminate hate, so that's a kind of a false, dream. But what we need to do is lead by example, right? And it doesn't help, I believe, when you have councillors who have not been properly vetted, perhaps, who come along and voice opinions that actually come back and haunt them, but also conflate the issue. So we need to figure out how our politicians can lead by example right from the start, from A to B, vetting and the way that they talk and communicate through the media.
Zia, what more can be done?
Yeah, well, look, I think the levels of anti-Semitism in this country now, the levels of extremism are intolerable. But I think it is important we understand what time it is in this country. We now have a well-organised force in politics, and in some cases is polling second in national polls, that frankly has become a poisonous vessel for extremism and anti-Semitism. And we can go through, well, you may scoff at that, but let's go through the evidence, shall we? So number one, as has already been pointed out, just today we found out 2 Green councillors, candidates had been arrested by the police for anti-Semitism, one of whom said that the stabbing in Golders Green was, quote, revenge, not anti-Semitism. Mohsin Ali, your fellow deputy leader of the Green Party, said that the actions of Hamas on October the 7th were simply them fighting back. That is a direct quote to describe the murder of over 1,000 innocent civilians. And the leader of the Green Party, Zach Polansky himself, said just a few days ago that there was a big question about whether it was a real concern about safety for Jewish people in this country or simply the, quote, perceived concern of unsafety. Well, I would have thought that perhaps the 3,700 anti-Semitic incidents recorded last year alone might have convinced him. Perhaps the burning to the ground of 2 Jewish charity ambulances may have convinced him. Turned out they didn't. Well, I wonder whether the 2 Jewish men now fighting for their lives as a result of being stabbed repeatedly in Golders Green might convince Zach Polansky that the threat to Jewish people is in fact real. And I'm afraid, as I said, the Green Party is no longer a party for those who care deeply about the environment. It has been hijacked by extremists and is a vehicle for sectarianism. And I'm afraid Zach Polansky should be ashamed of himself.
Zach Polansky is a Jewish man who loves his Jewish community, and in fact he did make a statement of solidarity and upset, and making it very clear that anti-Semitism is real in this country. I agree with the woman over there. I want to be working cross-party to solve this. I love working cross-party. I do. I work cross-party and leading a council and alliance, and I think it is what we must do. This is bigger than party politics, and it's not impressive to play party political football. I could sit here and quote things that Reform candidates, Reform councillors, Reform people have said, and they've been expelled, or they've been arrested, or they're now in prison, and I'm not, going to do that. I could do that. But the point is we need to move, when I talk about we need to move above hate, it's because this isn't just anti-Semitism. There is racial hatred across our societies like I haven't known in my lifetime. I'm so deeply worried about that. And your party needs to take responsibility for some of the narratives around immigration which are feeding that. It is wrong. We have to work together. We have to rethink how our society is, and we have to lead with hope. And I agree, let's do it cross-party together. It's much bigger than all of this.
Look, see, I feel duty bound to say, because obviously you've had a go at the Greens for anti-Semitism. Clearly your leader came in for quite some accusations of anti-Semitism when he was at school, with 20 contemporaries from Dulwich College making allegations about him being anti-Semitic. Do you want to say anything about that?
No, I'm happy to talk about Nigel's record as an adult human in the realm of politics in this country, as opposed to things that somebody claims he said when he was a prepubescent schoolboy.
Well, it was 20 people. I take your point that it was a long time ago.
And by the way, there are as many, hold on, Fiona, there are as many people, contemporaneous witnesses there who said those things didn't happen. But let's talk about Nigel's record as an adult, which I think is reasonable to do. As a British politician, I would argue not a single politician in public life today, certainly no British political leader, has done more to highlight these issues. And you're right to say that many of these issues are interconnected. There are many things that are interconnected here. And Nigel has gone out of his way to highlight the concern and risks around Islamist extremism. I don't want to speculate about the motives of the attacker yesterday, but what we do know for sure, we know for sure that the vast majority of MI5's caseload are Islamist extremism. We know that the attacker yesterday was referred to Prevent, just like Axel Rudakabana was many times, for example. We know Prevent is totally unfit for purpose. And we also know, by the way, that we are living in a country at the moment in which, sadly, sectarian politics is on the rise. Nobody was quicker to the mark in highlighting the risks of this than Nigel Farage. I'm very proud that he's the leader of our party.
There was a general intake of breath here when Zia was talking about Emma.
Well, I mean, I can't think of another political party other than Reform that has stoked division in our society. I mean, I'm just flabbergasted that you can sit here and claim that Nigel Farage is this paragon of virtue. Yeah. I find it completely, I mean, it's laughable, frankly. So, yeah, I mean, and I do think, we've got to root out all racial hatred in all political parties. And I do think the Greens have a problem with anti-Semitism. Your other deputy leader, has also said today that some of the candidates that have been suspended should take legal action against your party. So you've really got to sort out your leadership. But maybe I can say a word or two about the actual attack, which was horrific yesterday. And there's obviously been rising levels of anti-Semitism in our country. And I was on the phone earlier to a friend from the Jewish community, and I know that there's real anxiety and distress. And I know that words aren't enough. We do also need to take action, but I do think words, nevertheless, are important.
But you had Keir Starmer, the local MP, being shouted down by a fair number of people when they visited.
Well, as I say, I totally understand, particularly in that part of London where there have been attacks in quite a small area of the capital. We had the burning of the arson attack, on the ambulances, which was only a couple of streets away. So I totally understand that there's a real sense of anxiety and distress in the Jewish community. And so let me just say what we're doing about it. But I also want to say that we stand in solidarity with the Jewish community, and we'll do all that we can to keep the community safe and root out anti-Semitism. But we are boosting funding for security measures around synagogues and Jewish schools. We are preventing hate preachers from coming to our country. And on the question that the chap at the back raised around marches, only earlier this week did we pass legislation to strengthen the powers of the police to both control and, in some cases, stop altogether marches where they have an impact on specific communities. So we are taking action. Of course, more needs to be done. But I also want to say this. Our Prime Minister is somebody who has a very close relationship with the Jewish community. Rooting out anti-Semitism is a cause that is very close to his heart. And when he became leader of the Labour Party back in 2020, the first thing that he did was to take steps to make sure that we had a disciplinary process that acted immediately to root out anti-Semitism, and we have cleaned up our party, and it's incumbent on all political parties on this panel to do that in their own parties.
All right, I'm going to come to you, Des, forgive me. I know you've been waiting for it. I'll just get a bit more from our audience. Man here in the front, in the shirt.
I'd just like to touch on Emma's point about cleaning up her party. I think it's fair to say the Labour Party is anything but clean at the moment and finds itself
in terms of anti-Semitism?
Well, just widely speaking of their councillors, their MPs, they've had more MPs forced to resign or step down than any other party currently in power. And secondly, actually, to Zia, there's obviously a lot of incumbent councillors or councillors that are due to be elected. We've got loads of new councillors coming in from both probably the Greens and Reform based on current polling. What are both parties doing to ensure that these councillors meet the standards that the party is setting? What specifically are they doing with their vetting? Because as we can see, Labour's vetting clearly does not work based on the amount of outspoken politicians in recent weeks and months. And how can this reassure the general public that the person that they're voting for is who they represent?
OK, we're going to come on in a bit more detail, Councillor, in a minute, so forgive me. There's one in the back end with a green T-shirt, yes.
I was going to mention, if you're going to talk about Nigel Farage's record as an adult, how about the fact that he pushed a lie of 350 million a week to the NHS during Brexit? How about the fact that he moved to America after the Brexit loss? How about the fact that he takes more money from other sources to take speeches than his government job? How about the fact that he initially supported Trump's war in Iran? How about that?
Okay.
And it does...
Yeah, I'll give you a chance to respond. Man at the back in the white shirt. Yes.
Regards to the lady from the Green Party, you just stated that you've seen racial hatred in the country. Could you please specify where that hatred is coming from?
Not quite sure what you mean. Do you mean from the general public? Or?
Well, she said there's racial hatred in the country, and I'd just like to know where she thinks it's coming from.
I mean, I was talking about the fact that there is a rise in racially motivated crime, that kind of thing. There's more and more hate crimes. There's more reports of people feeling uncomfortable, unsafe. Yeah. There's more division.
You said there's racial hatred. Where do you think it's coming from?
OK. What are you getting at exactly?
Well, where does you think this racial hatred is coming from?
What do you mean? What specific sectors
of
the community?
I can actually say that where I think it's coming from, actually, is that we live in rip-off Britain and people are having a really, really tough time. They're struggling because their bills are going up. They're struggling because they can't afford their rents. I actually think this is the reality. They're struggling because food is now so expensive, it's eye-watering. What that means is that there's then a tendency to find someone to blame. And I think that there have been narratives. Zia's party is definitely one of these narratives, like the people propagating these narratives, that will point the finger at certain communities to blame them when it is not the fault of those communities. So I actually think that the economic situation, which is disastrous at the moment, is a big reason why hate's on the rise. So that's why we need to solve the economic problems. We need to end rip-off Britain, make sure ordinary people are having a better life day to day, not struggling so much, but we also need to really focus on community cohesion and living well together.
OK, let me...
But you're not prepared to pinpoint where it's coming from. There we go. Thank you.
We hear your point.
Thanks.
Daisy, let me, because you sat here very patiently. So let me just remind you, what can be done to assure more safety and security of this community across the country?
Well, there'll be many Jewish people sitting at home tonight who will be really scared and really angry and really frustrated. And some of them have written to me and have asked the question, how many more synagogues have to be ram-raided or firebombed? How many more stabbings do there have to be? How many more shops have to be set on fire until we see some real action to tackle anti-Semitism? And what's so important is that whilst these are anti-Semitic attacks, and they are attacks on British Jews, they are also an attack on our British way of life and our British values, which is the freedom for every person to be who they want to be, and the freedom to have whatever religion and practice that religion, whatever it might be, or to have no religion at all. So this should be of broader concern to all of us. But in terms of what can happen, there are concerns that the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, may be behind some of these attacks. That group should have been prescribed in 2022 when we Liberal Democrats first called for it. The Conservatives didn't act. Labour haven't acted. If there's any shred of evidence at all that they are behind these attacks, there are no more excuses for delay. The second thing is, and I am glad to see that finally, at last, the Prime Minister seems to think that he will finally bring forward some legislation to tackle state-backed terror groups as well. But on the point about protests, we have to be really careful here. Wording matters. I think it is wrong to call them hate marches. They are marches that have been hijacked by elements of hate. And that is a really big distinction, because we should absolutely allow people to protest peacefully when they want to raise concerns about human rights issues wherever they are in the world. But what's happened is, because of the way that Labour has sort of screwed up this prescription of Palestine action, the police have now got the worst of both worlds. They're being asked in law to arrest people who are peacefully protesting, and they're not arresting the people who are celebrating Hamas and Hezbollah and other terror groups. So we have the worst of both worlds. We can fix this so that people can go on protests peacefully, but that we tackle the hateful elements of those speeches. That is the way to fix it, so that our freedoms as a country are not undermined, whilst we also protect Jewish people and our way of life.
I'm going to move on. Zia, do you want Charles to respond to the woman in the green t-shirt?
Yeah, look, happy to respond directly to the comments about Nigel's record. So, look, with regards to the £350 million number that was on the side of a bus, firstly, adjusted for inflation, considerably more than that is now spent on the NHS post-Brexit. Number two, that was not his bus. It was actually another, I think actually rival pro-Brexit group that actually had that
Brexit
bus. Nothing to do with Nigel. And I also want to make the comment, though, you know, if we're talking about these marches, because we've heard the Tory representative today, to the degree anyone's paying attention to that, claiming that they would now ban the marches in which people openly support terrorist organisations and make anti-Semitic comments. Well, the Tories had 14 years in power. Not only did they fail to do that, they literally fired Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary at the time, who was making this very point. So I think it's a bit rich to now hear that they would do this now that they've been turfed out by the electorate.
Let's inject some facts into this. So these marches, as we have all acknowledged, have arisen since those horrific events on October the 7th. I remember I was on Question Time immediately after those events.
I'm sorry, I've just got to correct that. The notion that these marches were not happening before October the 7th is simply not true.
Please, let me speak.
Marches are not anti-Semitic.
We have been, we had a series of, every time, if you remember a few years ago, the protests were very much focused on the environment. We took legislation after legislation to try to ensure that we keep that balance right between what is, the peaceful right to protest, but the also containing bad behaviour. But what is different about these marches, and by the way, it's not just us saying that we think there should be a moratorium on these. It's also Jonathan Hall, KC, who is the country's independent advisor on anti-terrorism legislation. What we know from these marches is that Jewish people are afraid to walk the streets of our capital city and elsewhere when these marches are happening, because those marches make them feel deeply unsafe. That has to be tackled, and I'm calling for the government to take action.
But we've legislated to give
all
the
right.
police
If you just make the...
Jewish people on the marches, these marches are not anti-Semitic marches. They're marches against the actions of Netanyahu and
There are clearly differences of opinion about that. So let's just...
about conflating anti-Semitism
but
and resistance to the Israeli
There are
regime.
differences of opinion about that, so I'm just going to park that there for now, because there are other questions you wanted to ask, and I'm going to try and make time for them. Let me just say that we're in London next week for our programme. I mean, we're not going to be on air on Thursday. That's results night for the elections. We're going to be on air on Friday. So when most of the results will have come in. So we shall see where we are. So if you'd like to come and be part of that programme in London next Friday, go to the Question Time website, follow the instructions there. And the week after that, we're in Brecon. We'll see what happens with the Welsh Senedd. So if you want to be in the audience for that programme, that will be on a Thursday. Go to the Question Time website. So London and then Brecon. OK, let's take another question, which goes some way to addressing the point you were making. Charles McLeod, where are you? Off you go.
Voters are losing trust in the councils Why should they believe the insurgent parties will deliver real local change rather than just simply replicate all of the problems that persist now?
That sounds like a very world-weary question, if I may say. Is that because you're thinking it's just going to all be more of the same?
Well, it's many things, isn't it? Every day we traverse the potholes that are within the councils, you get reminded how services are deteriorating, and then you see how much is spent on executive remuneration compared to other sectors. And it goes on, and then running up debts like central government, and it's just very wearisome. So we're hoping, you know, to see real change come from these insurgent parties if the result next week comes in as expected.
OK, well, look, Zia, let's kick off with you. And if you could answer at the same time this man at the front, his point about vetting, because also you've had issues with your candidates as well.
Yeah, so the first thing to say about local councils, and I've spent a lot of time in town halls across the country, in reform-controlled councils, north of 70% of council budgets are statutory, meaning that they are mandated by central government. The vast majority of that, whether we like it or not a single councillor of any colour or stripes in this country can make any decisions about who gets that social care, the parameters upon which it's delivered. So first of all, we've got to be clear about that. And Reform have already talked about how we need to reform social care, we need to reform welfare payments, because frankly, it is a freight train, you know, accelerating towards the cliffs to which the whole economy is attached. So that's the first point to make, right? But councils do have power that is localised. You mentioned potholes. I personally went through you know, the numbers in a lot of these councils, and what you'd find is, you know, you're told that all this money has been allocated for potholes. The reality is that money is not ring-fenced, and so what ends up happening in reality, and it's really important that everybody understands this, the majority of that money in most councils never makes it to fixing the roads.
Well, that seems to be the case, Zia.
It is diverted away to social care.
And that
so
seems to be the case with one of your councils. Hang on, Zia. It seems to be the case with one of your councils. Tell me if this is not right, but this is according to a Freedom of Information request prompted by Labour, that since you mentioned potholes, pothole spending in North Warwickshire under Reform has dropped by more than 50%. Is that right?
Well, the first point to make is judging a council by what the spending in absolute pounds is not the correct measure. The correct measure is to determine the quality,
People want to know. Potholes come up every week.
Fiona, with respect. Fiona, with respect.
Well, is it true? Is that council spending 50% less on potholes?
Fiona, with respect.
Well, with respect, I'm asking you that question.
If you ran a business on the basis of, I want my department to spend as much money as possible, and that's all I judge them on, then your business would not last very long.
Okay.
One of the big problems we have in this
country
country right now is a huge amount of money is wasted. We have championed at Reform more efficient ways of utilising money that is allocated to potholes to the degree it's actually spent on fixing roads. The truth of the matter is the contracts that are dished out by councils to contractors to supposedly fix potholes invariably have no quality component to them whatsoever, have no guarantee attached to them whatsoever. That stands in stark contrast to many countries that are great at this, countries like the United Arab Emirates, for example. So I've overseen personally a lot of our initiatives on this, and I'm very proud of that.
Zia, I'm just going to give it one more go. Has pothole spending in North Warwickshire under Reform dropped by more than half?
Well, I'm not across that precise bit of detail. I will tell you this. No party who controls councils in this country has been more successful in fixing potholes than Reform. That we've already published that information.
OK. Would you like to listen? I'll come around the question, but since you asked this question about vetting, and also we talked about the Green candidates, listen, all parties have problems with vetting. I think it's worth pointing that out. But since we've got you here, Zia, and the question was about insurgent parties, of course, which Reform is one. So you've got a candidate in Bexley who shared a photo online with a quote that Islam was the religion of rape, incest, and paedophilia. Her name is Caroline Panetta. Is she still standing?
She won't be standing, but I want to make this point too.
She's been suspended then?
She will not be standing. And I want to make this point, because I was chairman of the party. It's a start-up party, right? And I set up the vetting process. I'm very proud of that. We have vetted north of 9,000 candidates. We're standing 5,500 plus candidates in the space of 2 years, unprecedented in British political history. If I sat here and told you that our vetting process was perfect, you'd know that that could not be possible. I'm going to be very honest with you. It's obviously not perfect, but it is north of 99.9% accurate. And to the degree that slumps slip through the net, we act on it decisively. But I want to make a few points here, that it's perfectly legitimate, Fiona, for you to hold reform to account.
If you don't
yeah,
mind.
hold us to account for reform candidates. But what's interesting is nobody seems to be interested in any of the bad eggs and bad apples in other parties. The Tories have had to stand down more candidates
have talked
than
about
us.
the Greens
The Tories have stood down more candidates than us as a result of misdemeanours. A Tory candidate just last week threatened to murder a high-profile celebrity's mother, barely covered, if at all, in the media. So look, is our vetting process perfect? No. No vetting process is. But to stand 5,500 candidates in the space of 2 years and to have only a small handful that sadly did slip through the net, which we have acted upon, I'm very proud of that.
OK. Since the question about insurgent parties, Rachel, let me come to you. So the question is, why should voters believe that insurgent parties will deliver real local change rather than simply replicate the same problems?
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I love co-leading a council, a district council in Sussex, and we have been able to make a difference for our communities and for nature. And I know, I can tell you that what you get when you vote Green are local, very, very hard-working councillors who are absolutely committed to two vested interests, and that's people and planet, and nothing beyond. We don't have donations from other big corporates. We don't have any other interests to look after. I can tell you about things that Greens have delivered where they're leading councils across the country. There's a huge push to deliver as much affordable and social housing as possible. There's lots of things with investment in local businesses, brilliant local procurement strategies, things to make a difference. We've done things like double council tax on second and empty homes so that we can give more people council tax relief. But you're right in that what we can't do is change the system. And I always say to people who are standing to be a councillor, I say you can move the needle on the dial in so many ways, and you can always make a decision, work for more people in communities and work better for nature. But we do bang our heads against a brick wall of government legislation. What's great is that being in those councillor positions and running councils helps us understand what needs to change. And a lot of the time, it is simply that the system, so taking housing, you cannot actually solve the housing crisis in the current planning system because it begins and ends with profit. Developer profit is protected in this system. We need to have council housing at scale, and that will take a change of government legislation. Councils need funding at scale. I mean, hilarious to hear you talk about social care when Reform threatened to close a care home in Lancaster to make savings. The problem is that the government has been defunding councils for years. Reform will say, we'll make savings, they're all inefficient. And then time and time again, you come in, you take power, you can't find any savings, and you put the council tax up. That's what's happening when some of them are left. There were 57 Reform councillors took over Kent, there's only 48 left. They drop like flies because they're not local, and they're not working hard, and they don't care about their local community.
Right. I'm going to come to you in a minute. Daisy, let me come to you, because the Lib Dem record on local council, so let's have a look. Last year, Lib Dem in Windsor and Maidenhead, you'll all know this, of course, because you live here, council tax increased 9%. This year, 7.5%. And Lib Dem-run English councils imposed, on average, the highest council tax rises of all the parties. Do you stand by that record?
So, Liberal Democrats have had huge success in local elections over the last few years, and in many places we've taken over control of councils from the Conservatives, who left behind them an awful mess. If you look at places like Woking, where the council was almost gone bankrupt, we've been clearing up the mess left behind by the Conservatives in many council places. And unfortunately, councils don't really have many ways of raising money to pay for services, but Liberal Democrats in local government...
9%.
Liberal Democrats in local government protect services against the odds. What I would say, though, to Charles, who asked the question, I think you used the word weary. And I think that kind of sums up how everybody feels at the moment. Everybody feels like we're working harder and harder, paying more and more in tax, and getting less and less from the state and from our local councils. And the fundamental problem, the reason why we feel like that, is because we're not growing the economy. And that is why we Liberal Democrats have repeatedly said if we can get a better trading deal relationship with Europe, we can actually grow our economy faster, and then we can grow the size of the pie. But in terms of why you should vote for Liberal Democrats at a local level, Liberal Democrats have protected services against the odds. We've been investing in community facilities and leisure centres, and we've been cleaning up the mess left by the Conservatives before us in many councils around the country.
Woman in the black short-sleeved top, yeah.
My point is to Zia. I work in the social care sector. I work with old people as a care worker. And I was wondering, we're overstretched most of the time. A lot of us are working 15 to 16-hour days. And I'm wondering where you think this overspending is going, because we're overstretched.
All right, I'm going to get around the rest of the panel as well, if you'll forgive me. Yes, man there in the blue sweater and blue shirt.
I think one of the problems is we're devoid of trust in our leadership. You've all got something different, but nobody's talking together. We've got big problems in this country, but actually I'm voting for those that are going to solve the SEND crisis that our family goes through. Not just potholes, it's easy to say potholes. Education system, 66% of parents actually are saying that their schools are failing. So we need a combined thinking. We've got no leadership. You're all leaders, yet between you, there is massive divides. It's no wonder there's division in this country, and why we all sit here, I'll mark anybody, because it will just be the same. We need to bring this country together if we're going to march forward.
Bring this country together, Emma. I mean, it's not... You know, polls are polls, but it's... If the polls are to be believed, and of course we'll find out next week, it is not looking good for Labour, is it?
Well, look, we're going to fight for every vote. We're out there campaigning day in, day out. But what I would say to the gentleman that asked the question is that I've seen Labour councils across England protect local services in the face of Tory austerity. When the Tories were in power, I've seen Labour local councils protect children's centres, which was an initiative of our previous government, protect libraries, invest in our green spaces. And actually, on the ballot paper next Thursday in England is the who you want to run your local council. And I think Labour councils have got a great record. You asked about the other parties. Nigel Farage said when they took over Worcestershire Council, where they did put council tax up by 9% and cut local services, he said he wished they hadn't bothered. I mean, that is quite extraordinary. What contempt for local government. I'm sorry, Rachel, you say the Greens run local councils well. In Brighton, when the Greens were running the local council there, they had the worst recycling rates in the country, which is quite extraordinary given that the Green Party is supposed to care about the environment. So I would urge people to look at what your local councils and local councillors are doing and judge them on their merits. And I've seen fantastic Labour local councils across the country delivering really good local services for people.
So, Victoria, it's not looking great for Labour. It's looking to be terrible for you guys as well.
Well, I want to acknowledge what Charles said, which is that everyone is feeling weary at the moment. As Daisy said, I think we're all feeling poorer. We are seeing our national and public services feel more and more creaky. And we have, I'm afraid, in the insurgent parties, people who are making promises that they cannot hope to keep. Reform, I have a Reform County Council in Lincolnshire. They were voted in last year. They promised to cut out waste and lower council tax. This year they're increasing council tax. And on the matter of SEND, when DFE, the Department for Education, wrote to Lincolnshire County Council asking whether they would like to apply for funding to set up a new SEND school in our great county, vast rural county. We desperately need more SEND facilities. Reform seemed to have either ignored the letter or not got back to the department in time, and that funding has now gone to Kent. So there are very real life implications for the votes that you're all making, if you're in areas that are voting next week, for the future of your local area. And what I will say, I want to be positive, because I think part of the problem of politics is people knocking each other. I'm going to be positive. In Kemi Badenoch, she has travelled the length and breadth of this country in a way no other political leader is doing. She is speaking...
I'm not sure that's quite right. I'm pretty sure all the party leaders are doing that at the moment.
I'm afraid, Daisy, I'm not seeing the same level of movement around. Kemi is speaking to people across the United Kingdom. We are setting out our plans to say, look, there are, as has already been referenced, there are some really big issues facing our country. We are the only party doing that very deep thinking about what we need to do, for example, to control welfare spending, to help cut your taxes, to help raise funding for defence spending.
OK, but the question's about local councils. Obviously, none of those things are in the gift of local councils.
But we are part of a Conservative team, And I know there are very, very good examples of Conservative councils up and down the country, including doing fantastic work on potholes, and we know that Conservative councils have the lowest average bandy council tax of all councils
and many
in
have
England.
huge amounts of debt and almost bankrupted their councils.
That's
You're
not
in power,
correct.
Victoria. You slash local government financing. I mean, it's quite extraordinary that you sit there and talk about your teams. We had austerity for so many years under the
why did we
Conservative
have
government.
that?
And that's why we've got a problem with potholes. That's why we've got...
Why did we have that? Because in 2010, the last Labour government bankrupted this country, left the note saying there is no money left, and we had to take the tough decisions needed to make up for that. Unfortunately, this government is doing exactly the same.
Let me take another question, because I know you all want to jump in and say, A, your leaders are travelling the length and breadth, and B, you're all doing marvellous things. But let me just move on. OK, Robert Fielder, where are you sitting? Off you go.
If the projected losses at next month's local election materialise, should the Prime Minister resign?
What do you think?
I mean, I think it's been a waterfall of disaster since day one, with broken tax promises, people in his cabinet breaking the law. I think the local elections will be the knockout blow.
And you think you should go?
Yes. But quite who will replace him? I mean, goodness me.
Well, look, we had a general election in July 2024 and we won a big majority in Parliament and a mandate to change this country for the better. I understand that people are impatient for change. I understand that people are facing really real pressures on their cost of living. And as a government, we are doing some really positive things to address that. For example, this month, you'll see, thanks to the decisions made at our last budget, that over £100 is off your energy bills, and those bills are capped and locked in until the end of June. The state pension's up, the minimum wage is up. We have frozen prescription charges, we have frozen rail fares. So we are making real progress here. And I will say something, the Prime Minister, when it came to a really tough international situation, showed real judgment when he refused to be dragged into a war in Iran that the Conservatives and Reform would have had us dragged into. Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage would have gone head first and said to Donald Trump, yes, OK, we'll get involved. The Prime Minister did not cave to the pressure of the President of the United States, and we did not get involved in that war. But now we are concentrating on how it's not our war, but we're concentrating on how we protect people from the impact of that war back home.
And you're all united in Cabinet behind Keir Starmer?
Well, I look around the Cabinet table and I see a group of people who are
united behind him? Is that what you see?
I think we are, and you saw that this week. We are united behind him, and you see a Cabinet that wants to change this country for the better, invest in our public services. NHS waiting times are at a 3-year low. We're making real progress, but there's still more to do.
I mean, there's a lot of briefing going on behind the scenes, as you know.
Well,
but OK, I hear what you say. Should the Prime Minister resign, Zia?
Well, not only should he resign, I think he should call a general election in order for whomever the next... And look, people have talked about how weary everyone is. God knows how many prime ministers did we get through under the Tory party. They came and went with extraordinary frequency. But that is because of the appalling calibre and quality of the people that were put forward into those positions. And we are in a situation. We are in a situation in this country now. We're in a situation in this country now where, yes, Labour did win, to be fair, a walloping majority. They did that having won the vote of just 1 in 5 people eligible to vote in this country voting for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. And what has he done since? He has U-turned, I think, north of 25 times. He imposed withdrew the winter fuel allowance. That wasn't in their manifesto. He then increased national insurance contributions on employers. That has cost jobs, taken unemployment in this country to 5-year highs, youth unemployment to 10-year highs, higher than in the European Union for the first time ever. So many people are suffering as a result of that. That wasn't in his manifesto. He did an inheritance tax raid on farmers, driving a farmer to suicide, and many more considering it. Absolutely appalling behaviour. Now he's withdrawing jury trials, not in the manifesto, trying to impose digital ID guarantee on British people, not in his manifesto. He appointed Peter Mandelson, who was widely renowned and known to be the Prince of Darkness, and had been forced to resign from his 2 previous senior positions.
Okay, Zia.
And yet he still appointed him to that role.
And Nigel Farage welcomed that appointment.
The only reason he is still in his seat is
time.
because not a single Labour cabinet minister, let's be honest, wants to wear this shellacking that is coming Labour's way next week if the polls are correct. Not only should Keir Starmer resign, he should call a general election.
Okay, so Zia, you would like a general election. There are people applauding that. And obviously you'd like Nigel Farage to become Prime Minister. Since you're here on the programme, let me just ask you about this story that's emerged in the last few days, about this gift of £5 million for Nigel Farage from Christopher Harbon, who is a cryptocurrency investor based in Thailand. Now, the gift was made before Nigel Farage became an MP, but the code of the register of interest is very clear that all financial interests and registrable benefits in the previous 12 months must be declared, and this was only a few months before he became MP. Why has he not declared it?
OK, so the first point to make here is that Nigel has obviously been probably the highest profile British politician in recent decades. I think he's been the most impactful British politician of our lifetime.
But he's bound by the same rules as everybody else.
I want to make the
so why is he not declared?
I want to make a point. I will answer that question directly, but I want to make a point. I've worked with Nigel every day now for almost 2 years. I've been privy to his personal security briefings. And I will tell you this, the truth of the matter is, Nigel goes about his day-to-day life under an ever-present and severe threat to his life. He was attacked in 2017, attacked in 2019, attacked again in 2024. An illegal migrant coming across the English Channel threatened to murder him. Threatened to murder him repeatedly. Threatened to murder him.
Gift.
No, but it is important context.
I don't think anyone doubts that Nigel Farage has security issues. That's clear.
Yeah.
But so you don't need to state that, I think, to our audience. But he was given a gift of £5 million and did not declare it.
Yeah.
Now, when Labour, when Keir Starmer was given a gift of a couple of suits and some glasses, Reform jumped up and down about that.
So let me answer your question. Let me answer your question
there are lots of MPs
directly,
who have
because you are
had
insinuating, Fiona. Hold on. Let me answer that question directly, because there is clearly an insinuation here that Nigel has broken the rules. Let's be crystal clear about it. I don't know if you've actually read the Code of Conduct, Fiona.
Well, of course I have.
OK, fine. So if you have read it, then you will know that Chapter 3, Section 25 makes crystal clear that members do not register interests under the category of those benefits that do not have any relation to their business in the House being the House of Commons. That gift was an unconditional gift for Nigel's private purposes before he'd even considered becoming an MP.
It also says here, as you know, big in a trade quote,
so I'm afraid it's simply not the case.
The possible motive of the giver and the use to which the gift is to be put should be considered. If there's any doubt, the benefit should be registered.
And there is no doubt, because, again, let me be crystal clear, Chapter 3, Section 25. Look, I'm literally giving you the relevant sections of the Code of Conduct that are in play here. Nigel has done absolutely nothing wrong. But the context is actually important, because Nigel's house was firebombed, and I actually take exception to political parties and politicians. Listen, I disagree profoundly with every single other politician on this panel.
All right, well,
if reform won the next general election, let me make the point. If reform won the next general election and I was the Home Secretary, I would not hesitate to give you whatever round-the-clock protection you needed to ensure your safety if you were coming under severe threat, which Nigel has done, and government after government failed to give Nigel that protection. And to now jump up and down when a British citizen, an upstanding British citizen and a patriot decided, you know what, I'm going to make sure that Nigel no longer has to... No, Nigel can be safe and Nigel can be safe.
Victoria.
Gosh, and this lot want to be in charge of your life savings and our economy. Goodness me.
We've got 5 minutes left, so we have to be reasonably brief.
Returning to the original question, which is about the Prime Minister, I have to say I think he is finished. And I say that because he has tested again and again the patience of the British public, from the very start of Freebie Gate through to all the machinations that we've had with cabinet ministers having difficulties with their mobile phones, the anti-corruption minister being investigated for corruption, the deputy prime minister, deputy prime minister being investigated by HMRC for whether or not she paid her stamp duty. We have all of these problems burning in the background. Of course, we also have Lord Mandelson, and by the way, it is the Conservatives that have brought this to light with our humble address. It's a great shame that Nigel couldn't be bothered to turn up to vote on Tuesday to require the Prime Minister to be investigated. But what comes down with Keir, I'm afraid the problem is he is showing a pattern of behaviour, which is that when he gets into hot water, his reaction is to throw somebody else under the bus.
Okay.
Rather than show leadership. And the public can sniff this, they can smell it.
All right, I must bring the rest of the panel in.
This is the most unpopular government in history.
So people tonight have talked about a lack of leadership, they've talked about weariness. What is striking is we are the 5th richest country in the world, and yet a third of our children live in poverty. Children are hungry in schools so they cannot learn. Our NHS is crumbling. There's a housing crisis. How can this be? We're the 5th richest country in the world. It doesn't have to be that way. The reason Keir Starmer needs to go is because he is weak, because he lacks vision, and because it's a time when we need bold courage and we need to really transform the systems that we have so that ordinary people's lives are made easier, so that bills come down, so that we stop kowtowing to profit and we have a much fairer economy.
So can I just
Daisy,
what do you
I
mean
need
by
to hang on.
richest country?
So under the
I need to bring
Conservatives,
Daisy, or she won't get a chance to answer.
under the Conservatives, we all got so tired of the sleaze and the scandal and the financial mismanagement. And sadly, it feels like we have the same under Labour. And to make matters worse, there was one thing that Labour promised. They promised change. And we can't feel it. We can't see it. So I think, sadly, it probably is time for Keir Starmer to go. But what I would say is, whilst we Liberal Democrats are winning the argument on so many issues in Parliament, taking action on social media giants and holding them to account, taking a strong position to work with Europe so we can end our dependence on Donald Trump, whilst we have a plan to tackle the cost of living right now by cutting fuel duty, using the extra revenue coming into the government. Sadly, the Labour government keeps sitting on its hands. It's too sluggish. But please do not take a gamble on reform, because the donation that we were talking about a minute ago shows that Nigel Farage is playing by the Trump playbook, and there is a really big risk that Donald Trump's America will become Nigel Farage's Britain. We do not want our British politics funded by foreign Bitcoin billionaires.
Let me take, I've got about 2 minutes left. Over here.
One of the previous gentlemen mentioned SEND and education. Labour Party
Special
made it very
educational needs,
special education. Labour Party made it very clear that by taxing independent schools 20% VAT, that you would put an additional 6,500 teachers into the teaching environment to help support SEND within schools. Where's that gone?
Okay, I suspect I'm just going to get around a few more people. You forgive me, because I've only got a minute and a half, so, or in fact, less than that. Yes, man in the green shirt.
Yeah, so what I've observed, a lot of this conversation is quite a grey area. Council tax has gone up, but maybe the council's actually done something better. Or Nigel said this, Nigel said no. What I've got here is like, I'm an engineer, a scientist by background, and what I really care about is energy. And that's one of these things which I feel has been turned into a culture war. So let me say one thing. We know that heat pumps, insulation, EVs, etc., can save half your energy usage. It's a massive difference. And in Iran, and this is not just about climate change. We can use that as a strategic reserve. We can use that oil for aviation or AI data centres. But we've got politicians here on the table today, I believe, who deny these facts. And why should we platform you when we can save that money, the energy, the money, and this also means that we're not paying that oil money to Russia, which uses it to strike Ukraine every day, and we pay again for defence missiles. So it's a very serious question, and this is the science, this is the fact. You cannot say that that does not save half the energy. So I'd like a clear answer on that.
I'm afraid I've got
particularly
15 seconds left, so I'm afraid, my apologies, I'm going to clear answer. You've got 10 seconds to say something if you'd like to in the black top there.
I'd just like to say that I'm very surprised that the panel keep calling for the Prime Minister to resign. It's a bad thing for British politics to constantly run through Prime Ministers time after time after time.
Our time is up. Forgive me for those of you particularly you wanted your questions answered at the end, and we've run out of time, so I'm sorry about that. Thank you very much to the panel, though. Thank you very much to all of you for coming along here this evening. Of course, thank you to you at home for watching. Remember, Question Time next week is on Friday, live at 7:30 on BBC One. Don't miss it. Who knows what will have happened by then? From all of us here in Maidenhead, bye-bye.